everybody. I'm Catherine Rose, founder and CEO of channelWise. channelWise is a platform that provides channel partners access to vetted, been there, done that experts for one-on-one video consultations to help them go farther, faster in their business. Today, I am joined by a true channel veteran and one of the tech industry's most experienced, respected authorities on the SMB channel, Rich Freeman. Hi, Rich.
Hello, Catherine.
So great to have you.
Yeah, great to be here. I appreciate the invite and the chance to chat about the channel, which I always love to do.
I know. Well, you've been writing about the IT Tech channel for a really long time. We won't say how long. I was around. So tell us a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you said one of the most experienced. That just means I'm old. Yeah, I've been writing
Seasoned. We
about the
like to say
channel.
seasoned, Rich. Seasoned.
There you go. There you go. I like that. I'm gonna hang on to that word.
Well, I keep the salt and
I've been
pepper
writing about the.
going.
Yeah, I do. Um, Yeah, 2006. I've been writing about the channel since 2006, so yeah, quite a while, and it remains as interesting now as it was then.
For sure. Well, tell us a little bit more about that evolution that you've witnessed, and how things have really transformed over those years.
It's been an amazing thing to watch, Catherine, because in 2006, 2007, which is right around the time I wrote my first articles about managed services was this brand new thing. There were very, very few people doing it. And all the people who weren't doing it were extremely skeptical. It's like, you're telling me my customers are going to pay me every month, even though nothing broke. This just isn't going to work. So it was like nothing in 2006, 2007. And now here we are, 2023, and there are private equity firms sitting collectively on hundreds of millions of dollars that they are eager to invest in acquiring MSPs because the logic and the power of that business model is so strong now that it's transcended the IT industry. Wall Street gets it now, and they want in. It's been an amazing thing to watch. It really has.
Well, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. We'll get back to that. The idea of these PE firms and kind of like snapping up the MSPs but I'm introduced you as someone who really focuses on the SMB channel. And I really would like it if you wouldn't mind just kind of like define that for us because coming from the sales side, it depends on who you're talking to, what SMB means. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's a classic thing, actually. Is when you say SMB, what are you talking about there? And I just try to keep it simple because there are definitions. Well, I mean, is it up to this $1 million of revenue or how? For me, if you have up to say 500 employees, you're sort of in the sweet spot of SMB, and between 500 and 1,000, you arguably qualify as mid-size, and particularly these days, as the whole co-managed IT phenomenon has really caught on. I think the SMB definition or boundaries has expanded some, but that's basically how I do it.
And why did you see that as a niche for you?
What do I? In terms of what I
Yeah,
do.
yeah. In terms of really like focusing on the SMB, like calling out the SMB channel versus the IT tech channel or midsize or whatever.
Well, one of the key things that a lot of vendors don't understand, as I'm sure some folks in the audience here appreciate, is there is a big difference between a partner who works in the enterprise and a partner who works with SMBs in terms of business model, in terms of where they're getting their revenue, in terms of the kinds of relationships that they maintain, the needs that they have. So the SMB channel is a portion of the channel overall with its own unique sort of profile, and that in itself kind of makes it a niche, and that whether it's the managed services model, cloud service provider, reseller, system builders are still out there
Yeah.
to some extent. That you've got your own particular set of challenges and opportunities, and I really kind of focus in just on that and allow a lot of other very smart people to write about the enterprise channel.
So talk, obviously you write about this a lot and you're constantly interviewing folks. What are some of the trends that you've been seeing in the SMB channel right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, if you look at the larger economy right now, I mean, there are some encouraging signs as we're talking right now. There was some encouraging inflation data that came out today. Great, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. Inflation is still very high. People are still very worried about a recession. We've all seen in the headlines this year layoffs at the big technology companies, and so there's a lot of reason to assume that this is not a great time for the SMB channel, but particularly if you are an MSP, it's actually kind of a great time right now. Kaseya posted some research numbers not too long ago. I think something like 50% or more of the MSPs they surveyed grew revenue in the at least in the double digits last year. Comparable percentage. We're expecting the same for this year. So, I mean, MSPs are optimistic, MSPs are growing, and there's a great reason for that. I mean, basically, particularly in a rough economy
Mhm.
or a down economy, a lot of what managed service providers do is very attractive to end users. They're looking to save money, they're looking to automate, and MSPs can help them with that. And so, interestingly enough, IDC did some research just within the last few weeks where they went out to a bunch of businesses and asked them, does the state of the economy make you more or less apt to invest in cloud computing? And it was something like 44% of them said, yeah, we're investing more in the cloud right now because
Mhm.
of the economy. And another 39% were kind of holding steady state, but nobody's cutting back on their cloud spend because of the economy. Nobody's cutting back on their managed services spend. The cybersecurity landscape, um,
Yeah.
another double digit growth opportunity. That IT overall is a single digit growth opportunity this year, 5.2% according to the latest IDC numbers I've seen. But cybersecurity is growing faster than that. So this is if you are particularly if you are a managed service provider, despite some of those economic headwinds out there, it's actually not a bad time right now.
I always tell people don't pay attention to that because in the Great Depression people made money and the dot-com boom. I wasn't around for the Great Depression. My son asked me that the other day. He said, "Mom, I was like, no, no, no. I'm sending you back to history class. But the dot-com. I was around for the dot-com boom. I was around for the meltdown on Wall Street, the mortgage meltdown. All of these, obviously COVID and everything. I think that people still make money, right? And you see the opportunities, and it sounds like you're really outlining them, like what those opportunities are. So I tell people all the time, like, just there's always going to be something, right? There's always going to be something and that's affecting the economy. So, just focus in the areas that are growing. Um, you talked about MSPs and the trends for MSPs. Let's switch our hats a little bit and talk about the vendor supplier side of things. And one of the things you recently wrote about was, VC funding. Obviously, the early dollars have all but dried up, in a lot of ways. And the VCs are really eyeing, being very specific about like the investments that they're making. And you mentioned something about that a leaner crop of investment targets to choose from might help partners identify vendors worth betting on. So, as you know, like the channel keeps growing and more folks are entering the channel. Talk about the opportunity for MSPs to really look at their stack and figure out who they're going to be partnering with based on some of those trends.
So, as you said, this is not a wonderful environment for startups and early growth stage vendors. There were enormous amounts of venture capital and private equity capital flowing into the IT industry in recent years. And like you said, all those companies, those investors are skittish right now. Worried about a recession. Interest rates are still very high, and that has an effect on how much people are willing to invest in these tech companies. And so a lot of what we're talking about here, which, like I said, appeared in a column that I wrote and published last Friday, a lot of this came from a conversation I had with a guy named Chad Cardenas. He is part of a venture capital or a strategic capital company called the Syndicate Group. And I asked him, I mean, is this a good time, a bad time for vendors in venture capital and so on? And he basically said, for the vendors, this is a pretty terrible time. Unless you've got artificial intelligence loudly proclaimed as part of your business model, in which case people are still throwing money at you. It's really hard to get funding right now. And so it's very tough for the vendors right now. But that, he said, might actually end up being an okay thing for the MSPs, but because with all of that money flowing into the marketplace, there have been lots and lots of vendors popping up all over the place now. So a few years back, if you were to look at some particular segment of the security market, for example, there might be 3 or 4 companies you really need to know about, and
Mm.
you can kind of evaluate them, decide which one you're going to invest in. Today, it might be 10, 12, 15 because of all this capital that's been flowing into the marketplace. And Chad's prediction was you're going to see some of those companies kind of fall by the wayside. And you're going to see fewer replacements come into the marketplace. And the net effect is going to be a simpler vendor landscape for the MSPs and the channel partners to navigate. You're just not going to have to figure out which of these dozen companies are the legit ones that I want to partner with, and which are, here today, gone tomorrow. It's just going to be easier to manage your vendor relationships.
Or in a sense, it could be an opportunity for some of those companies out there that may not be getting follow-on funding, who do have partners. Maybe they need to really be thinking about how to strengthen those relationships with the partners that they have, right? Because if they aren't getting the follow-on funding, they want to make sure that they're getting the partner relationships and really solidifying those, so that they can maybe grow instead of through investment, through customer acquisition. So I guess from a vendor perspective too, how can they set up their vendor programs? What trends or common things have you seen in the best of the best, out there, and give some advice to those vendor suppliers on how to set up a partner program that's worthy of MSPs joining and staying.
So it's interesting. I interview a lot of channel chiefs and partner program executives about the programs that they're running, and what I most often hear from them is that the number one thing that our MSP partners want, all our partners want, is ease of doing business. Just make it easy for me to do business with you, and that is a very important thing, and that is something that you have to think about in terms of the tools and the rules and the discounts and all that. You don't want to create friction in that relationship with the channel partner. But CompTIA, just within the last few months, did some research in which they were kind of talking to channel partners about issues that may have driven them to switch vendors. And the number one thing on that list, pretty comfortably, was profit and revenue opportunity. So, I mean, there are some pretty fundamental things I think that you, if you're designing a partner program, need to be thinking about. And first and foremost on that list isn't ease of doing business, as important that is this a growth opportunity, a profit opportunity, a revenue opportunity for this partner? That's what's going to attract partners, and that's what's going to retain partners. So everything you do around discounts and compensation and rebates and all that needs to kind of reflect that. That's important. I think flexibility and scalability is important as well. You want to give partners, regardless of where they are in their journey and where they are on the maturity scale, you want to give them a way to get in and begin working with you. And then you want to give them ways to go deeper and engage more deeply with you and grow with you and get rewarded for that. So,
Mhm.
you don't necessarily need 8 tiers in your partner program, but some degree of tiering so that you are recognized and rewarded for investing in that
For a
vendor,
much
and
deeper
they
relationship.
invest in you. I think that's really,
Mhm.
really important too.
Interesting, that disconnect and that gap in what vendors, or what you've heard vendors say and what actually is. So I think that that's a really important point to drive home, that all these other things are really great, but at the end of the day, these MSPs are businesses, right? And they're looking at profitability and scalability. But from the MSP side is, we they have all these vendor relationships. How can you advise MSPs to engage better with those vendors that they already have on their line card, and really work those relationships in a more productive way?
Well, the first thing I would say, and this is something that I've been saying for a long time, is when you are talking to your vendors and thinking about your relationship with your vendors, you need to think about that very much the same way you would think about approaching a potential client. Like you don't just kind of walk into a meeting with a client and you don't know anything about their business or their industry. You don't make a proposal without asking a lot of probing questions and understanding who they are and what their business is about, what makes them tick. So by all means, have that same mindset with respect to the vendors that you work with, and the specific vendor people you work with, your account manager, for example. Go ahead and just have a conversation with him or her. Ask them the question. What are your goals? What are you being measured on? What are the things that matter to you? Because the better you understand that, and the more closely you align yourself with that, the more success you're likely to have with that vendor. If you're working with a vendor that sells BDR and security, and you're thinking, I want to do some marketing events with these guys in security, but unbeknownst to you, that your account manager and the sales team at that vendor is being goaled around the BDR part of their business, and that's what they're really thinking about right now. You're going to have trouble getting their attention. Whereas if oh, okay, this guy's really focused on BDR this quarter, then I can help you sell some BDR, and
Mhm.
that'll get you more attention, get you a closer relationship. The other thing I would say, though, and this goes right back to what you were talking about before, in terms of the vendor landscape has tons of vendors in it. There's less funding coming into the market, so the vendors need to be focused a little bit more on maintaining and strengthening those MSP relationships. That puts you in a better position to get what you want from vendors these days. They need you more than ever,
Mhm.
and they have to fight for your loyalty more than ever, just because there are so many other vendors out there.
Mhm.
So don't be afraid to ask for what you want. They're not going to laugh and hang up on you. You might not get it, but don't be afraid to tell them what you want, whatever that is, MDF or margin or whatever. You're in a stronger position right now in those vendor relationships than you've been historically in the past.
Well, that's good news for MSPs. Yeah, I mean, I always say the worst they could say is no, right? Ask. But I think now that you've said it, it's they're much stronger in that position. So, maybe a couple of years ago, they wouldn't even bother because I knew the answer would be no. But now, they actually at least have the opportunity, or there's an in there. The speaking, we're stay on the subject of MSPs. I mean, you've written about them, gone to every show, spoken to so many. What do you see as like the common traits of successful MSPs?
Um, so we could spend a lot of time on that. I'll
We'll
focus
have a
in.
second interview on that.
Yeah, and happy to do it. Actually, I love that topic. I'll focus in on one thing, though. I wrote an article for Channel Pro some years back where I was kind of looking at what are the traits that the fastest growing MSPs in particular tend to have. And I came away from it with this list of what I call the three S's, because it's very easy to remember that way. And one of them is standardization. So, to the maximum extent possible, you really want to standardize your technology stack across the board within particular categories. You don't, if you can avoid it, want to be selling three different BDR solutions, three different endpoint security solutions. The more you're zeroed in and standardized on a particular set of products, the fewer technologies your people have to learn, and the less overhead that winds up going into managing all those relationships. So, from a growth and profitability standpoint, standardization is really important. Specialization is very important as well. To the degree that you have specialized knowledge, deep knowledge in a particular vertical industry, or even a particular sort of technology niche, if you're the CRM or the ERP person in your marketplace, that can help you grow faster, develop stickier relationships, higher margin relationships as well. And then the third S would just basically be scalability, which is just that the fastest growing MSPs I've encountered and written about had that sort of growth mindset and expectation going in. And every decision they made from the beginning, in terms of the tools that they adopt and the processes that they adopt and how they run the business, everything was based around the assumption that I'm going to grow a lot and I'm going to do it as fast as I can. And I don't want scalability to stop any of that, to
Okay.
impede any of that. So I'm going to build this company to grow right from the get-go.
Right from the start. Okay, great. One thing I did want to do, we're coming at the end of time, but I did want to mention, obviously, you're a very respected journalist, and I'm sure you hear a lot of times people are like, how come you're not writing an article about me? Um, I'm going to ask you about channelWise. I'm just kidding. You can write about me anytime you want. But if MSPs, or because obviously if they're trying to get acquired or get customers or whatever, it would be great to have their name in lights, so to speak, right? And be recognized in the channel for their and vendors too. What are some tips you can give to folks who are looking to get coverage, from respected journalists like yourself?
Well, a few things. So first of all, you need to make yourself as visible as you can as somebody they might want to talk to. And so, at a minimum, there should be some biographical information on your webpage that kind of helps people understand who you are and your degree of experience and maybe specialized knowledge that you might have. To the degree that you are sharing thought leadership on social media, which is just a great marketing technique. But if you're doing that fairly regularly, journalists will see that. And if they're looking for a source in a particular area, your name might pop into their head. That person has said a lot of smart things about this field before. I'll contact them. And then there are websites, and the one that just kind of pops into my head is called Muckrack. But Muckrack is a site where journalists can kind of identify themselves to sources, and sources can identify themselves to journalists. So if you really would like to be quoted in articles, go into Muckrack, create an account there, and journalists who are looking for someone to interview about something or other will quite often go into Muckrack and do a search, and maybe your search result is going to come up there. So there's that. Make it easy for journalists to know who you are and what you know. And then the other things would just be around, and it almost goes back to this idea of understanding who you're selling to. Same thing with the media, right? If you're trying to get their attention and work with them, understand what makes them tick.
Mm.
And one of the things that makes a journalist tick is how responsive are you? If I have a deadline this afternoon, can I get through to you? So you want to be responsive, and when that opportunity comes to you, you want to be concise, and you want to listen carefully, and those things kind of go together. So make sure you understand what it is that this journalist wants an answer to, what it is they're writing about, and give them that information that they asked for. Keep it concise, and then move on. Or if they, it could be after 5-10 minutes of talking, they'll say thank you very much and leave. That's okay too. So understand what they're doing, give them what they need, and only what they need, as opposed to what you're interested in talking about. And that will help a lot as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Rich, so much for joining us today. If you'd like deeper advice on any of these topics, head over to Rich's profile on channelWise, and the link will go ahead and put that into the post under the interview. Or if you have other questions, we do have lots of other experts on the channelWise platform, all ready to help you or your partners go farther, faster in your business. Until next time, everyone, thanks again, Rich.